Welcome back to Revise and Resubmit. Today we are diving into something pretty interesting. It's about doxing, politics, and how it can even impact hiring decisions. I've been thinking, hold on, how does any of this even affect me?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Well, stick with us, because today we're going to be talking about this research paper that really digs deep into how we judge people. Based on just these little snippets of information that we see online. I mean, let's be real, we've all done it.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And this paper really breaks it down, like, in the context of hiring decisions. It's called Doxing, Political Affiliation, and Type of Information. Effects on Suspicion, Perceived Similarity, and Hiring-Related Judgments.
Catchy title, right.
Yeah, and it was published in the Journal of Applied Psychology, which is a pretty big deal.
Yeah, for our listeners, that's an FT50 journal. So this isn't just some random blog post. This is like legit research.
Exactly. Top tier stuff.
And the researchers, they really went all out. They did 2 separate studies to see how, like, the source of information, like if it was doxed or just found routinely, and then the type of political information that was out there. And even whether the applicant's political views matched the person reviewing them. Like, all of that played a role in how they were judged.
Yeah, it's fascinating.
So before we really jump into the research, can we just take a second to define doxing? I feel like that word gets thrown around a lot, but what does it actually mean?
Yeah, so basically doxing is when somebody reveals private or identifying information about another person online. And they do it publicly with the intention of harming them or harassing them. So we're talking about things like home addresses, phone numbers, workplaces, stuff that could put that person at risk.
That's scary.
Yeah.
And this paper highlights how doxing is often used as a form of punishment or revenge.
Right. Especially when it comes to political affiliations, which is kind of messed up.
It is messed up.
Yeah. And it's actually way more common than you might think. One study they cited estimated that 6 million Americans have been doxed.
Wow.
That's 3% of the population.
That's a lot of people.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And it's kind of a sobering thought. Think about your own online presence for a minute. Have you ever, made a snap judgment about someone based on something you saw online?
Oh, totally, yeah.
It's so easy to do.
Yeah.
But this research shows just how impactful those judgments can be, especially when it comes to something like hiring.
Absolutely. And the researchers didn't just tell people, hey, this applicant was doxed.
Yeah.
They actually created this really clever experiment using mock Facebook pages. So participants, all of whom had experience in hiring, they would see a job application and then they'd also see a Facebook page for that applicant. But the conditions varied, so sometimes.
Okay, so hold on. Were these Facebook pages super fake looking?
No, not at all. They actually designed them to look like totally authentic Facebook profiles. So sometimes the page was presented as if it was found through a routine social media check, and other times it was more like, hey, this just got doxed and is circulating online.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, and then on top of that, they also manipulated the type of content that was on the page. So some posts were positive about a political party, others were negative about the opposing party.
So they really covered all their bases there.
Yeah, and to make things even more interesting, they also factored in whether the applicant and the person doing the hiring shared the same political affiliation.
Wow, okay.
Yeah, so it's pretty comprehensive.
So someone's applying for a job, hiring manager sees their Facebook page, either through this routine check or because it's been doxed. What were the researchers actually measuring?
Okay, so they were looking at a few different things. First, there was suspicion. Did the information on that Facebook page make the hiring manager suspicious of the applicant?
Okay.
And then they also measured perceived similarity. So, did they see the applicant as being similar to them?
Which makes sense. I mean, I can definitely see how both of those things could influence a hiring decision.
Yeah.
But it goes beyond just a gut feeling, right?
Oh, yeah, definitely. They also measured things like expected task performance. So, would this person actually be good at the job? And also expected impact on the organization's image. And even the potential for retaliation against the organization.
Wait, hold on. Retaliation, someone being upset that the company hired this person.
Exactly. So it's a really comprehensive look at how this kind of online information can have these ripple effects. It goes way beyond just the individual applicant.
That's crazy. Okay, so the big question, did doxing actually lead to harsher judgments?
You would think so, right? But that's where it gets really interesting. So in the first study, they actually found that participants were less suspicious of the applicant when the information came from a doxed source. Which is kind of surprising.
Yeah, that's not what I expected at all.
Right. Like you would think that if something's been doxed, it's like red flag, right?
Exactly. Like it must be bad if someone went to all that trouble.
And it seems like it might actually be the opposite.
So why would that be?
Well, the researchers have a couple of theories. One idea is that people tend to discount information if they think the source is untrustworthy or biased.
That makes sense.
Like, think about it. We're bombarded with fake news all the time. So maybe when we see something that's been doxed, we're just automatically a little more skeptical.
Like, okay, who's trying to manipulate me here?
Exactly. And it kind of makes you think about the whole cancel culture thing, too.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Like, are we too quick to judge people based on these little snippets of information that are taken out of context?
I think that's a really valid point.
Yeah.
But okay, so what about the content itself? Like, did the type of political information on the Facebook page actually make a difference?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. This is where it gets even more interesting. So in both studies, they found that negative political information had a much stronger impact than positive information.
Okay, so like, what kind of negative information?
We're talking about things like posts criticizing or even insulting the opposing party.
Oh, okay, so like really going after the other side?
Exactly. And this really highlights that negativity bias we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, bad stuff just sticks with us more.
Right.
But here's where I'm a little confused. Wouldn't you be more likely to like someone who shares your political views, even if they're being a little harsh towards the other side?
Yeah, you would think so, right?
Like, hey, we're on the same team.
Yeah, but that's actually not what they found. When the reviewer and the applicant shared the same political party, seeing the applicant post negative things about the opposing party actually led to more suspicion, and they even rated them as less similar.
Seriously. So it's not just about being on the same team, it's about how you play the game.
Yeah. Exactly. The researchers talk about this concept called symbolic threat.
Okay, what's that?
So it's not just about like tangible harm, it's about the threat to our values and beliefs.
Okay.
So even if you agree with someone's political stance, if they express it in a way that's like aggressive or disrespectful, it can actually make you question their judgment. It's like they're threatening your core beliefs, even if you agree with their overall position.
That's fascinating. This makes you think about how you present yourself online, especially when it comes to politics.
Right, like maybe tone it down a little.
Yeah, exactly.
And you know, this actually ties directly into how the researchers kind of expanded the traditional idea of the decision space.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
So they weren't just looking at whether someone would be good at the job, they were also looking at how these online revelations might affect the company's image and even lead to potential backlash.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about the applicant anymore. It's about how their online presence reflects on the whole organization.
Exactly. So they found that if a hiring manager was suspicious of an applicant because of their political posts, they were more likely to worry about negative impacts on the company's image.
Makes sense. Like imagine a potential customer sees those same inflammatory posts and thinks, wait, this is the company I'm supporting.
Yeah.
Not a good look.
Nope. And then there's also the whole retaliation piece. So in the second study, they actually used a more realistic doxing scenario, like a tweet calling out the applicant and linking to their Facebook page.
Oh, wow. That's way more realistic than just saying this was doxed.
Right. And they found that this kind of public doxing made hiring managers significantly more worried about potential backlash.
That makes sense. Like if someone's willing to publicly shame an applicant like that, who's to say they wouldn't try to stir up trouble for the company that hires them?
Exactly. It creates this whole atmosphere of fear, and it extends beyond just the individual.
Wow. So given all of this, like what can organizations actually do?
Well, the paper actually offers some really practical recommendations.
Okay, let's hear them. Because it sounds like social media is a minefield for hiring managers.
Oh yeah, it definitely can be. So one suggestion, and this might sound kind of radical, is to just completely avoid using platforms like Facebook and Twitter in the hiring process.
Seriously, just cut it out entirely.
It's a bold move, but remember, they found that negative information from social media had a much stronger impact than positive information.
True.
And there's also the legal side of things to consider. Like, social media checks haven't really been proven to be reliable predictors of job performance, and they can actually open the door to discrimination lawsuits.
So it's about minimizing risk for the organization.
Exactly.
But okay, what if a company just has to use social media? Like, is there a right way to do it?
Well, The paper suggests a few strategies. First, they say it's really important to have clear policies and procedures in place to make sure that social media checks are done fairly.
Okay.
So maybe someone in HR who's not actually involved in the interview process reviews the content.
That makes sense. Keeps it more objective.
Right. They also recommend training hiring managers to recognize their own biases and to really focus on job-relevant information. So basically, treat social media as just one small piece of the puzzle, not the whole picture.
Okay, so proceed with caution.
Definitely.
So far, we've talked about the downsides of social media and hiring. Were there any potential benefits mentioned?
Not directly. Their focus was really on the risks. But, let's be real, social media can provide some valuable insights.
Like what?
Well, you can get a sense of someone's personality, how they communicate, what they value, stuff that's kind of hard to gauge from just a resume.
It's like a window into their life outside of work?
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a tightrope walk. You have to weigh those potential benefits against the very real risks of bias, discrimination, and harm that we've been talking about.
Right, it's a delicate balance. So it sounds like the message is proceed with caution. Whether you're an organization using social media for hiring or just an individual thinking about what you post online.
Yeah, I think that's a great takeaway.
Okay, so we've unpacked the doxing piece, the Facebook experiment, those symbolic threats, and all the implications for organizations. What else did the authors want to highlight?
Well, they do a really good job of setting the stage for their research by talking about the increasing polarization in American politics and how that's kind of spilling over into the workplace.
Oh, yeah. You can't escape it these days.
It's like every conversation turns political.
Seriously.
And the paper actually cites a study where 62% of Americans said they have political views that they're afraid to share.
Wow, really? That's over half the country.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy.
It speaks to this climate of fear and division that we're living in.
Absolutely. And it's not just about being judged or ostracized. It's also about the fear of losing your job.
Yeah, that's a real concern.
The researchers talk about this concept of ideological misfit.
What's that?
It's where people feel pressure to conform to the dominant political views of their workplace.
Oh, I see.
So if you're like a liberal working in a conservative company or vice versa, you might feel like you don't belong and end up leaving.
It's sad.
Yeah. And it also raises concerns about echo chambers forming within organizations where everyone's afraid to rock the boat or express dissenting opinions.
Which is definitely not healthy or productive.
Nope.
So it seems like this research goes way beyond just hiring decisions.
It really does. It's a reminder that the lines between our personal and professional lives are becoming increasingly blurred, especially in the digital age.
Yeah, for sure.
We need to be more mindful of how our political beliefs and how we express them can impact not only our own careers, but also the culture and climate of our workplaces.
It's a call for more awareness, more empathy, and maybe a little less keyboard courage.
Totally agree.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, but there's still more to unpack, right?
Yeah, there's one more important piece.
Okay, what's that?
The authors also talked about some limitations of existing research and areas for future study.
Okay, so what are some of the things they highlighted?
Well, they pointed out that most studies on this topic focus specifically on hiring decisions. But political affiliations could also affect things like promotions, performance reviews, teamwork, you name it.
It's true, it could affect all aspects of work life.
Right. And they also emphasize the need for more nuanced measures of political beliefs.
Yeah, because it's not just about checking a box next to Democrat or Republican.
Exactly. It's about understanding the complex tapestry of values and experiences that shape those beliefs.
And how those beliefs might actually play out in a workplace setting.
Exactly. And, they also want to see future research explore how gender and ethnicity might intersect with political views to influence these decisions.
I love that they're not just presenting findings, but also pushing the field forward.
Absolutely, encouraging others to build on their work.
Speaking of pushing forward, are we ready to wrap up with their conclusion?
Let's do it! Join us for part 3, where we'll discuss the final takeaways and what this all means for you, the listener.
And we are back with Revise and Resubmit for part 3 of our deep dive. We've been talking all about doxing, politics, and how it all plays into those sometimes tricky hiring decisions. I gotta say, some of these findings have been pretty surprising.
Yeah, there's definitely been some eye-openers.
So let's wrap up our deep dive by going over those key takeaways from the authors. Like, what did they really want to leave us thinking about?
Well, they really emphasized how, doxing is such a unique challenge to study, especially in the context of hiring. Because with doxing, you have someone outside the organization. who's deliberately trying to inject information that could potentially damage an applicant. It adds this whole other layer of complexity.
Yeah, it's like throwing a wrench into the whole process.
Right.
And it really highlights how vulnerable we all are in this digital age.
Absolutely. Like anyone can be a target.
So it's not just about what you post online, it's about what other people might post about you.
Exactly. It's a whole new world. And they also talked about the importance of looking at both positive and negative information. When we're studying political affiliation, a lot of past research focused mainly on positive cues, like, showing support for a particular candidate or cause.
Right, like, look how much I love this person or this party.
Exactly. But as we've seen in this study, negative information, like those really critical posts about the other side or, even insults, that stuff can have a much stronger impact.
Yeah, it seems like that negativity bias is hardwired into us.
Yeah, bad stuff just sticks with us more.
So something to keep in mind for all of us, whether we're hiring managers or just scrolling through our own social media feeds.
Yeah, be mindful of what you put out there. And another big point they made was that we need to broaden our understanding of what actually influences hiring decisions. It's not just about skills and experience anymore, it's also about things like suspicion and how a potential hire might impact the organization's image.
Yeah, especially with social media, like things can go viral in an instant.
Exactly. It's like one little spark can start a huge fire.
One controversial post and boom, you've got a PR nightmare on your hands.
Right.
So what's their advice to organizations?
They're basically saying proceed with extreme caution. If you're using social media in hiring, you need to have really clear policies and procedures in place.
Like really buttoned up.
Yeah, to try and minimize bias and risk.
Makes sense. But they didn't just stop at those practical recommendations, did they? They also talked about some really interesting areas for future research.
Oh yeah, they definitely did. They pointed out that their study focused mostly on hiring, but political affiliation could also affect things like promotions, performance evaluations, teamwork, all sorts of stuff.
It's true, like it could have ripple effects throughout the entire employee life cycle.
Exactly, there's so much more to explore. And they also want to see future research go beyond just those simple labels of Democrat or Republican and really get into the nuances of what people believe.
Yeah, because it's so much more than just checking a box.
Right, everyone has their own unique set of values and experiences.
That shapes their political identity.
Exactly, it's complex. And they also raise the question of how things like gender and ethnicity might intersect with political views, and how that could further influence decisions.
Wow, it's like they're opening up a whole new world of research possibilities.
They really are.
I really appreciate how they're not just presenting their findings, but also pushing the field forward.
Absolutely, encouraging others to build on their work.
Which is what good research should do. Before we sign off, I want to circle back to one of the biggest takeaways for me. This idea that we're living in such a polarized world right now, and how that polarization is really seeping into our workplaces.
It's definitely something to be concerned about.
Yeah, and the authors really cautioned us to be mindful of our own biases and how those biases can color our perceptions of others.
Especially those who hold different political views.
It's so easy to fall into that us versus them mentality.
Oh yeah, totally.
But this research is a reminder that we need to resist that urge.
Absolutely, we have to be better than that. We need more self-awareness, more empathy, and a willingness to really engage in respectful dialogue, even when it's hard.
Even when we disagree.
Exactly.
Because ultimately we all have blind spots.
Yeah.
And those blind spots can lead to unfair judgments and missed opportunities.
It's about recognizing our shared humanity, even amidst our differences.
Well said. So on that note, I want to thank Philip L. Roth and all of his colleagues for this incredible paper. It's really given us a lot to think about. And for our listeners, if you want to dive deeper yourselves, the full paper is called Doxing, Political Affiliation, and Type of Information. Effects on Suspicion, Perceived Similarity, and Hiring-Related Judgments. It was published in the Journal of Applied Psychology. And remember, that's an FT50 journal, so it's definitely worth checking out.
And a huge thank you to all of you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it insightful and maybe even a little bit challenging.
And if you want to make sure you don't miss any future episodes of Revise and Resubmit, be sure to subscribe to our channel on Spotify. We're also available on Amazon Prime and Apple Podcasts.
So until next time, stay curious and keep those critical thinking skills sharp.